the Great Depression resulted in the creation of the Bank of Canada. Now, one of the things I found in my research is this was much more a political decision than it was an economic decision. By that I meant that a combination of the informal system in Canada with the Canadian Bankers Association and the Ministry of Finance roughly established the monetary policy. But a lot of people, particularly Western Canadians, were demanding that we have a central bank. In that depression, per capita income in Canada declined by 50%. The province of Saskatchewan declined by 75%. In the 1931 census, Saskatchewan had the largest population in Canada of any province other than Ontario and Quebec. And of course, it only recently has passed in population size where it was back in 1931. So this was a devastating depression, particularly hard hit for Canada because we were so dependent on commodities, and specifically wheat. And the price of wheat, I think in 1932, we've all heard of the iron laws of supply and demand, but the fact is there was no supply, the demand went to hell. The price of wheat in 1932 reached its lowest point in 300 years. So it was devastating economically, very much compounded by the Smoot-Hawley tariff in the United States. What Smoot-Hawley did was destroy the Alberta beef industry, and the U.S. erected all these barriers, mostly aimed at our primary producers. A lot of people were demanding that we have a central bank. A Royal Commission was appointed. The chairman of that Royal Commission was a very distinguished British jurist, Mr. Macmillan. There was another Brit on the commission who basically, I think, was trying to work to restore the influence of the Bank of England on the Canadian system. There was Sir Thomas Wythe, who had done an outstanding job as being Minister of Finance during the First World War, a very prominent French-Canadian investment banker, and the sitting Premier of the province of Alberta, Mr. Brownlee. What was surprising, because in our use of Royal Commissions at the time, there often was an American. There was no American on this commission. And clearly, the two Brits had a disposition to follow the British example. The two knowledgeable Canadian bankers both opposed the creation of a central bank. So on a vote of 3-2, the Royal Commission came down in favor of creating a Bank of Canada. What I found fascinating in reading the Hansard records is there was no reference to the issues that White and Beaubien had mentioned, entirely focused on would it be government-owned or privately owned, and Mr. Bennett, the Prime Minister, clearly favored ownership by shareholders. And so when the bank came into being, it was owned by shareholders. Indeed, the vote was organized by the Chamber of Commerce for who would be on the board of directors. But then the government changed in 1935, and the government of Mackenzie King quickly moved to make it entirely government-owned. That is when it was mandated that the banks could only issue their own paper currency for X number of years, and then all currency would be issued by the Bank of Canada.
I frankly think the Bank of Canada, I think it works very well the way it is. I know that it was, I think, 50-50 until Mackenzie King took over the whole bank. I believe it was a joint venture between the government and the commercial banks at the time. But it's worked well, and I think it's worked well partly because of the independence that the bank has. The bank was formed under the Bank of Canada Act, and so its corporate structure is probably unique in that sense. But the two key process of the appointment of the leader of the bank has worked well, I think continues to work well. I think the bank has a unique role, and I think frankly the way it's structured works as well as I could imagine. I don't think there would be any reason or any advantage to have the bank a privately owned institution. In fact, it's almost hard to imagine a central bank like ours privately owned in a for-profit, certainly in a for-profit basis. I don't think that would make any sense at all.